I landed a job on a secret submarine. What they're hiding will shock you today. Nerves rattled as Chris stood on the dock, staring at the massive vessel looming before him. The submarine was a beast of technology and secrecy, its hull painted a deep, foreboding gray that glistened under the dim light of the harbor. It felt alive, as if it were breathing in the salty ocean air. No one knew what went on inside. Whispers drifted through the maritime community like smoke from a dying fire. They say it goes deeper than any sub ever built and comes up with things that haunt you. A local old-timer had muttered. What could that mean? Inside, the air buzzed with a tension that almost crackled. Equipment blinked and beeped, screens flickering with data that was likely too complex for most to understand. Chris's heartbeat quickened as he made his way down the narrow passageways. He felt like an intruder in a complex web of secrets, each turn revealing more questions than answers. The crew moved with the stealth of shadows, their expressions serious, eyes flickering with a hint of unsaid fears. It was chilling, thrilling, like stepping into a horror movie where he was both spectator and participant. As he settled in, he overheard fragments of conversations, hushed tones that carried words like anomalies, unexplained, and banshee. The crew was tight-lipped, but the stories squeezed through the cracks, weaving a web of intrigue around what lurked beneath the surface. The whispers churned his stomach. What had he gotten himself into? Did he want to know what they were hiding? Each word dripped with curiosity as it rang in his ears, unanswered. The very idea of something lurking out of sight, waiting to reveal itself, sent a cold shiver down his spine. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Just then, an alarm blared through the depths of the submarine. Chris's heart stopped. His blood ran cold. The crew sprang into action, urgency flashing across their faces. Battle stations, someone yelled. What had happened? The tiny space felt suffocating as fear clawed at Chris's throat. The lines between normalcy and chaos blurred, and he was thrust into a world where the veil of reality was perilously thin. He held his breath, anticipation heavy on his chest. What secret would the ocean throw at them tonight? The sound echoed through the submarine, sharp and jagged, slicing through the tension like a knife. Chris flinched, adrenaline slamming into him like a tidal wave. Faces turned toward him, wide-eyed and haunted, as they hurried past, their voices a whirlwind of commands and radio chatter. In a split-second decision, he sprinted after his crewmates, instinct guiding him through the narrow, twisting hallways. The air was thick with anxiety, the walls seeming to close in as he rounded corners, unsure of what awaited him. Bright lights flashed above, bathing everything in an unsettling hue that only amplified his racing thoughts. What the hell is going on? He gasped, struggling to keep pace. Emergency drills. We're prepping for potential contact. A burly crew member, brows furrowed in concentration, shot him a glance before plunging into a hatch. Contact? The word twisted in Chris's stomach. It didn't sound like a drill at all. That he reached a control room, the central hub of frantic activity. Screens glowed with data that was incomprehensible to him. A sudden hiss of steam punctuated the turmoil as someone shouted, "All hands on deck, secure the perimeter." Panic surged in Chris as he pressed against the wall, trying to process the urgency around him, a whirling storm of bodies, uniforms, and machinery. He spotted a senior officer, her face taut with dread. She barked orders, eyes darting anxiously to the monitors. Images flickered blips on the radar, something emerging from the depths, something that shouldn't be there. Chris leaned closer, heart racing. What is that? He breathed, pointing at the screen. The officer shot him a hard glare. Keep your eyes on your station, rookie. The warning already felt like a lead balloon in his stomach. Eyes wide, he fought the urge to pull back, instead focusing on the screens. The radar pulse intensified, a growing red smear on the digital map. Suddenly, the lights flickered, a low hum vibrating through the submarine as everything fell eerily quiet. No one spoke. Even the alarms had gone mute. Then, without warning, the ocean answered. The submarine trembled, a deep groan echoing from somewhere below. Chris clenched his fists, staring at his untouched workstation. What cryptic horrors awaited them in the dark expanses of the ocean? A sobering thought sparked anxiety as he imagined creatures of the deep awakening, newly roused by their presence. "Secure the hatches," the officer commanded, her voice ringing clear. Chris's mind raced. Hatches? They were sealing themselves into a dark fortress of fear. What were they trying to hide from? Or worse, what had already found them? A deep rumble reverberated through the hull, and Chris stumbled, gripping the edge of a console for balance. The air became frigid, an icy tendril creeping through the crew quarters. Faces turned pale as a feeling settled something unnatural was closing in. And in that moment, a scream pierced the silence, raw and throaty, a sound that turned the crew to stone. Chris's heart hammered. What kind of monster lurked in the shadows of the abyss? He barely had time to process the dread flooding him when he made eye contact with the officer, her eyes wide and reflecting an unshakable horror. "Get ready for anything," she whispered, fear trembling in every word. A shudder racked the vessel as the scream faded into haunting silence. As Chris braced himself, he wondered if they'd made it this far only to confront a danger worse than any nightmare. What lay beneath them now? What would they face next? The control room buzzed with an electric tension. Chris could feel the anxiety coiling tightly in his stomach. The senior officer's voice cut through the air again, sharp and commanding. "We need eyes on that radar. Where is it coming from?" He caught a glimpse of something on the screen, shifting quickly like a dark cloud against the ocean floor. A sickening chill washed over him. "What is it? What are we dealing with?" He mumbled to himself, the words barely forming as they threatened to escape his lips. Suddenly, the submarine rocked violently from side to side. Chris's heart lurched as he was thrown against the console, his vision blurring for a blink of an eye. The room erupted into chaos. Crew members shouted orders, rushing to their stations, faces pale and taut with fear. "Secure the emergency compartments." Another officer shouted. "We have to contain whatever it is." Containment? Chris's mind raced as he scrambled to his feet. They were sealing themselves deeper into the dark. Dread pulled in the pit of his stomach. What if the danger was already on board? As he regained his footing, a loud clattering echoed from down the corridor, followed by a sharp gasp. Chris turned, heart pounding, as a figure stumbled into the control room, drenched in sweat, eyes wide with terror. It was Carter, one of the engineers. His breaths came in ragged gasps. It's alive," Carter stammered, grabbing hold of the nearest console to steady himself. The crew turned, shock etched deep into their faces. "I saw it on the cameras. Something's swimming right above us. It's huge." "What do you mean huge?" the officer barked, demanding answers as the atmosphere thickened with fear. Carter's face twisted in anguish. "It wasn't just a fish or a whale. It's like a nightmare. Something from the depths. It brushes against the hull, and I can feel it." A low growl vibrated through the submarine, as if the ocean itself were responding to the engineer's words. The sound sent an icy jolt down Chris's spine. There was no denying the threat that hovered outside their metal cocoon. "We can't just sit here," Chris shouted, desperation fueling his voice. "We have to do something." The officer shot him a hard look. "You think we can afford any rash moves? We need to assess the situation." She turned back to the radar, her gaze piercing. But Chris was already moving, driven by an instinct beyond his control. He pushed past the chaos until he made it to the back of the control room. Peering through the reinforced glass of a viewing port, he squinted into the darkness. The ocean loomed like a vast abyss, and he could barely make out the murky shadows swirling overhead. Suddenly, something massive surged up, sending waves crashing against the hull. It was enormous, glimmering with an otherworldly sheen. Chris's breath caught in his throat. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen, a form that twisted and turned with unnatural grace. How could such a creature exist? Chris whispered, hand pressed against the cool glass, pulse hammering. The creature, no, the monstrosity swirled close, its enormous eye fixing directly on him. Those depths seemed to reach into his very soul, chilling him to the bone. The world around him faded. All that mattered was that gaze, predatory, intelligent, waiting. And then, an explosion of noise shattered his reverie as sirens blared back to life, drowning out logic. The crew snapped into action, shouting commands. But all Chris could see was the creature waiting hungrily in the black water. As if it knew exactly what they were, the officer grabbed his arm. "We need to move. If it breaches," but Chris couldn't tear his gaze away. The beast began to writhe, lightning fast, its body a blur of dark scales and lethal intent. He realized they were not the hunters, but the hunted. A vice-like pressure gripped his chest as realization bubbled to the surface. What if they weren't prepared for the reality that awaited them? Beneath the waves, shadows danced, and worse than mere fear lurked in the dark. "Brace yourselves," someone shouted, as the emergency lights began to flicker. Chris braced himself too, but against what? He had no idea. A pounding roar echoed from deep within the ocean, and in that heartbeat, he knew they hadn't just awakened something. They had become the prey. What would they face when the darkness finally broke open? The control room plunged into chaos, the sirens wailing like banshees. Chris tore his gaze from the creature, his heart pounding wildly, adrenaline surging through his veins. He felt alive and terrified. His breaths were quick and shallow, matching the rapid thud of his heart. "Chris, focus," shouted the senior officer, pulling him back to reality. "We need to get a damage report. Have we taken any hits?" No, not yet." Chris fumbled with the controls, fingers shaking. The HUD displaying vital signs flickered uncertainly, and he couldn't shake the image of that colossal eye from his mind. It was watching them. The thought made him feel sick. "We're running out of time. If that thing is aggressive, we need to be ready for an attack," she pressed, her voice strained. Panic laced the air, filling it with a sense of urgency that felt suffocating. From the corner of his eye, Chris noticed Carter stagger back to his feet. The engineer's pallor was evident as he wiped sweat from his brow. "We should seriously consider egress procedures," he gasped. "Whatever that thing is, it's not going to just let us hang around." Chris shook his head, uncertainty gnawing at him. But what if it's more interested in the hull? What if he stopped, fear choking his words before they could fully form? The thought hung heavy in the air, a cold weight of dread. They stood on a precipice of choice. Risk their lives to escape or stay locked in position and hope to wait out the storm. His hands hovered over the controls, fingers trembling as he weighed the options. Then, there was a violent jolt, more powerful than before. The submarine shuddered, alarms blaring louder as crew members struggled to maintain their balance. The flickering lights overhead cast stark shadows, painting the room in a dance of frantic uncertainty. "Dive deeper," the officer shouted, her voice rising above the cacophony. "We need to lose it." "No," Chris found his voice, forcing the words out. "If we go deeper, we're trapping ourselves. We can't even see what we're running from." Before she could respond, another wave of pressure slammed against the hull. The lights grew dimmer, flickering one last time before plunging the control room into near darkness. The air thickened with the tang of fear. "Emergency lights," the officer barked, but her command was swallowed by the rising tide of panic. "Get me visuals," Carter yelled, his voice nearly lost in the storm of shouts. "Use the backup cameras." Chris scrambled to comply. His fingers clicked frantic commands, a desperate race against time. The screen flickered to life, revealing grainy images of the abyss behind the sub. Emotion caught his eye, and dread washed over him once more. "There," Chris shouted, pointing to the screen. "It's coming. Right above." Carter leaned closer, peering through the dim glow of the monitor. No, it's just toying with us." His voice was barely above a whisper, shaking. "It knows we're trapped." The sound of warping metal echoed through the chamber, as if something was testing their defenses. A deep, guttural noise resonated from the depths outside, a warning or a threat. Chris's throat tightened as he watched the creature swirl closer on the monitor, its silhouette almost graceful. But there was nothing elegant about it. The beast was a death sentence wrapping itself around their lives. "Prepare for impact," the officer yelled as the submarine quaked again, metal shrieking in protest. With fear clawing at his insides, Chris felt the weight of their choices. Could they fight? Or would they be devoured? The icy grip of fate wrapped tighter around him. Just then, the monitor flickered again, displaying a blur of motion too quick to catch. Chris squinted into the poor visibility. But in the darkness, a second set of glowing eyes appeared, peering at them from the depths. What else is down there? He gasped, the horror settling deep in the pit of his stomach. The silence hung heavy as they all stared, frozen in uncertainty, awaiting the next move from the dark abyss. And at that moment, beneath the hull, they could all sense it. The second presence wasn't just there to watch. It was the harbinger of a harrowing dawn. What lay ahead when the shadows finally revealed their terrifying secrets? Chris's heart raced as he exchanged wide-eyed glances with Carter and the officer. The atmosphere was electric with a mix of dread and anticipation. Something was coming. The flickering monitor betrayed flashes of movement, but it was the smell of fear that weighed heavily in the cabin. It clung to them like a shroud. "Everyone, stay alert," the officer commanded, her voice cracking with tension. "We don't know what we're dealing with." The deep noises outside intensified, a curious blend of growls and vibrations, escalating into a rhythmic pulse. It thrummed like a heartbeat. They were not alone. Chris steadied himself against the control panel, grounding his spinning mind. The creature wasn't just stalking them, it was playing a game. "Backup cameras are useless now. We need to get out of here," Carter begged, panic seeping into his words as he gripped the edge of the console. He glanced at the emergency egress hatch. "What if we know?" The officer interrupted, eyes fierce. "We can't abandon the submarine while that thing is out there. If it's aggressive, it could blow us to pieces in seconds." Chris felt a chill crawl up his spine. But what if it isn't alone? He whispered, the thought haunting him. That second presence, those eyes, they could belong to something even worse. A loud crash echoed through the hull, metal screaming in protest. The submarine shook violently, throwing Chris to the floor. He scrambled back to the console, slamming his hands down on the controls, sweat pooling on his brow. "Brace yourselves," the officer shouted over the cacophony. Faces twisted in fear, the crew members holding on to whatever they could find. Another violent impact jolted the sub again. This time, the control panel flickered ominously. The monitor went dark, casting them into a veil of uncertainty. Moments felt like hours as silence settled in. Each breath felt like a confession. "Status report," the officer yelled, her face pale. "Trying to reboot the main system." Chris panted, frantically tapping the screen. "Come on, please." Suddenly, the lights blinked back to life briefly, illuminating the fear etched on everyone's faces before plunging them back into darkness. The eerie glow revealed the creature on the monitor, its dark silhouette looming larger, almost as if it could sense their fear. And then, without warning, another pair of eyes materialized around the same shadow, a monstrous second figure darting just beyond the hull. Chris struggled to comprehend it. "What are we looking at?" he stammered, unable to tear his gaze away. The officer cursed under her breath, veins of resolve steering through her. "It's a hunt. We need to outsmart it." Every instinct screamed at Chris to flee, that staying was an invitation to disaster. The memory of the colossal eye haunted him, as heavy as an anchor. "If they're working together," he started, his voice cracking, "then we have to consider alternatives." "What are our defenses?" "None." Carter shook his head, despair spilling from his eyes. "We're sitting ducks." Chris peeled himself away from the monitor to look back at the officer, determination rising inside him. "What if we can trick them? Use the sub-S systems against them? Draw them away? Time's not on our side." She snapped, grinding her teeth together. "We need a decoy," and another pulse from the outside, but this time more fervent, as if the creature sensed their desperation. The foundations of the sub rumbled, a terrifying reminder of their imminent peril as the monsters began their assault. Each second was wrapping tighter around them, smothering hope. But in that darkness, ignited by fear, a different fire flickered in Chris. "We can't give up," he urged, drawing in a shaky breath. "We need to move now." He turned back to the controls, his fingers shaking but deft. "We need to position the sub sideways. It could give us some maneuverability if they decide to come through." "Not a chance," the officer warned, glancing between Chris and the monitor where shadows danced menacingly. "Trust me, it's our only shot." Suddenly, a violent surge shook the sub once more. With a final glance at the screen, Chris's sweat-soaked hands gripped the controls. He was not just fighting for survival, he was fighting for a truth hidden in the depths, a secret that would shake the earth itself As the underwater shadows drew closer, the chances of survival lay in the unconventional. Would they hide in plain sight, or would the truth come cascading down like a tidal wave? The decision hung like a knife's edge above them, ready to slice through their darkness, but no path was without peril. Would the monsters revel in their traps, or would they be the ones getting snared? The answer loomed, a revelation that would echo through the depths. Chris's mind raced faster than his fingers could dance across the controls. Every instinct screamed at him to act, to outmaneuver whatever horrors awaited them in the darkness. The shrieking metal of the submarine echoed in his ears like an omen, each creak reminding him that time was slipping through their fingers like water. "Carter, get ready to divert power to the hydrophone," Chris barked, adrenaline surging through him as he fought to keep panic at bay. "We can use it to create noise. It could lead them away, maybe even give us a chance to identify them." Carter blinked, shock painted across his face. "They might come straight for us. We could be drawing them closer. Better than sitting here and waiting to be eaten." Chris shot back, his voice edged with desperation. He turned to the officer, who held her jaw tightly, weighing their options. The flickering lights continued their wretched dance, illuminating the fear that clung to every crew member. "Yes, do it," she commanded finally, her resolve slicing through the fog of fear. "But make it quick. They're closing in." Carter leapt to action, fingers flying as he recalibrated the hydrophone system, the hum of machinery filling the cabin. With each passing second, Chris felt the weight of the stalking creatures outside looming closer. The air was thick, electric with tension, every breath strained as if the very walls could suffocate them. That a final crash rattled through the sub. It was systemic, a pulse that quaked the steel frame and set the lights flickering once more. Chris could feel his heart hammering against his ribs. "Are you ready?" he called to Carter, who nodded, anxiety knitting his brow. "On my signal." Carter's face was pale, but he was committed now. A determination burned in his eyes that Chris had never seen before. 3-2 now. Carter slammed the button, unleashing a barrage of blaring sound waves that echoed through the depths. The sound boomed like thunder through the ocean, shattering the silence. Chris held his breath, darting glances at the monitor. Would it work? Were they far enough away? Outside, the deep growls faltered for a moment. It was as if the creatures had halted, caught in the grip of confusion. A flash of hope ignited within Chris, maybe they wouldn't follow. But that flicker died too quickly when the monitor blasted back to life. Two dark silhouettes surged toward them in swift, fluid movements. The monstrous eyes glimmered, hungry and predatory, and again, the realization hit him. It wasn't just one creature. Something far more sinister had risen from the darkness. "Shut it off. They know," Chris yelled, dread flooding through him. But the commotion had already begun with frenzied scratching at the hull, a sound that was worse than he had imagined. The water outside began churning violently. The officer shouted orders as the submarine shook yet again, waves of panic rising among the crew. "Reinforce the bulkheads." A deafening crash reverberated through the control room. The lights blinked and dimmed dramatically, casting eerie shadows across horrified faces. Everything inside the submarine felt alive with fear now, vibrating like a taut wire about to snap. Chris felt a vice grip around his chest. "What if we don't make it? What if don't you dare think like that?" The officer shot back, fire igniting in her gaze. "Hope is our weapon. It's what keeps us alive." But how long could they hold on to that hope? Just then, the screen displayed a flurry of movement. The creatures were circling, and he began to realize they were being hunted, not as individuals, but as prey within a grand design. "Carter, focus on the emergency systems. We need to prepare for a breach." But before Chris could finish, the lights snapped back on, and the monitor revealed something more chilling than shadows that on the screen. One of the creatures had paused, its grotesque form outlined against the flickering light, its eyes two pools of abyss reflecting the hungry darkness beyond. And then it happened, the creature began to speak, a guttural sound that reverberated through the submarine, imbued with an unsettling creepiness. "Why do you run?" The cabin froze, breaths halted and jaws clenched tight. Each crew member exchanged wide-eyed looks, the true terror dawning upon them. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a deadly game where the stakes stretched far beyond their understanding. "Chris, what do we do?" Carter's voice trembled, fear spilling over. But before Chris could answer, a chilling realization drew coldness through him. The truth of their mission, the secrets buried deep in the ocean's grasp, were about to be uncovered. The creatures were speaking about a connection, one that tied Chris to them more than he ever imagined. And just as hope wavered, a new surge of determination lit within. But would it be enough when the moment of reckoning arrived? Would they emerge from the depths unscathed, or was the truth lurking just below the surface? The answer now hung in the water, suspended like a baited hook, waiting for a capture that could change everything. The sound of scratching grew louder, like claws scraping against steel. The underwater nightmare outside had morphed into something far worse than Chris ever imagined. He glanced frantically between the monitor and his crew, each face a mirror of his own horror. "Reinforce the doors," the officer yelled, her voice slicing through the chaos. "Carter, help me with the emergency bulkheads." In that moment, Chris realized they were not just fighting for survival. They were racing against something primordial, a force that they had inadvertently taunted with their intrusion. With trembling hands, Chris reached for the emergency switch. "I'll activate the breach protocol. If they get through, don't," the officer snapped. "If we do that, we'll flood the whole compartment, but what choice do we have?" Chris felt his voice rise, fueled by raw panic. Outside, the roar intensified, sending ripples of vibration through the hall. Carter was already at the bulkheads, following the officer's commands. Her authority was like heavy armor amid the dread circulating in the cramped space. Chris' heart hammered. It was all collapsing. Then, a thunderous crack shattered their desperate rhythm. The lights flickered once more before plunging them into dimness, only illuminated by the eerie glow of emergency lights, casting elongated shadows that danced mockingly on the walls. "Stay calm. Stay focused," the officer shouted, but her bravado quivered at the edges. Fear was rising like a tide. It was palpable. Chris felt that same weight in his chest that had consumed him earlier, as if the darkness was pressing down, ready to swallow them. That a low growl mixed with an unnatural chorus of whispers echoed through the room. Vague shapes darted beyond the misty depths, circling like sharks drawn by blood. Each second stretched like a rubber band ready to snap. The voices were growing clearer now, their guttural cadence dragging on the nerves. "Why do you run?" they repeated, the question haunting and antagonistic. Chris felt as if the walls were caving in on him. The answer loomed in the shadows, teasing his mind, but he couldn't grasp it. "What do they want?" he finally gasped, struggling to catch his breath. "It's like they're playing with us," Carter muttered, his voice shaking, like a game of cat and mouse. Suddenly, a jolt rocked the submarine. The crew staggered, gripping their stations for support, but Chris zeroed in on the monitor. The screens glimmered, showing flashes of that monstrous form, the creature from the depths that seemed to be evaluating them with cruel interest. Then it lunged. Chris watched in horror as one of the creatures smashed against the hull, a terrifying percussion that reverberated in his bones. The monitor splattered with static, but through the darkening haze, he caught sight of the twisted form. Glistening scales and a maw filled with jagged teeth that seemed to grin wickedly at their plight. "Brace yourself," the officer commanded, pushing against the console. "We need to hold out until we can figure out a way to." A blinding explosion of sound erupted, a cacophony of raw, primal growls reverberating through the sub, drowning out rational thought. Chris felt nausea threatened to pull him under, but one thought anchored him. It was the connection. Was what they had unearthed down here somehow fueling this horror? Deep within, Chris wrestled with an unsettling idea that perhaps this was all more than just a fight for survival. The darkness fumed with secrets, ones that intertwined his fate with their own. "Carter," he shouted, desperation lacing his words. "What if we can communicate with them? Maybe they're searching for." Clenching his fists, Chris felt dread sharpen his resolve. If anything could save them, it rested on this tenuous thread. The impending confrontation was drawing closer. One final thought flickered through him, a truth he could not yet fathom, but it magnified the urgency behind his next words. "We have to find out what they want before it's too late." Just then, the lights flickered back on, illuminating the dark shadows in their cabin. Chris' heart raced as the monitor revealed the creatures in all their grotesque reality, united in a gaze that felt both predatory and knowing. He took in a deep breath, ready to confront the undeniable connection swirling in the depths. Would unveiling the truth save them, or seal their fate with the same darkness? The creature's whispers swirled through the submarine as if they awaited an answer. Would it be a door to redemption, or the last breaths of a doomed mission? Chris's heart thundered in his chest as he glanced from the monitor to the crew. Something primal thrummed in the air, a shared fear that locked them together in this gruesome dance with the unknown. The officer's face was a storm of focus, but Chris saw the flicker of doubt behind her eyes. It made him wonder if she, too, felt the impending doom. The light from the emergency panels flickered erratically, casting eerie shadows that twisted against the walls like tortured souls. Chris licked his dry lips, feeling the claustrophobic weight of the creeping darkness constrict around them. He focused back on the monitor, squinting against the glare to see the creatures more clearly. Their eyes shone like cold stars, piercing through the screen directly into his soul. They were one with the abyss, yet they hungered for something just outside their grasp. "Can't you see them?" he rasped. "They're waiting. They know something about us." The officer shot him a look, a mix of incredulity and fear. "We don't have time for theories, Chris," she snapped, shaking her head as if to clear away the chaos. "We need to focus on survival." "Right, survival," Chris mumbled, wrestling with thoughts that jostled in his mind. What if understanding this malevolent force was the key to salvation? What if they were merely victims in a larger game? From somewhere deep in the compartment, there came a resonant groan, rumbling through the metal hull like an ominous whisper, bringing chills across Chris's skin. Each jolt felt as though an intangible hand was reaching through the steel to snatch them into the depths. When Carter steadied himself, Chris noticed his face had turned pale, as if the reality of their situation was finally settling in. Maybe they want something we have," Carter stammered, gripping his shaking hands. "I mean, we dug something up." "Shut it, Carter," the officer barked, her voice rising with the tension around them. "We have no idea if talking to them would even work, and besides, we don't even know if they can understand us." "Then it's decided," Chris declared, a strange determination boiling in his gut. "We communicate. We try. For all we know, they could be intelligence we've never encountered before." As he spoke, a series of growls erupted, echoing through the sub, sounding too close for comfort. The display illuminated once more, revealing dark silhouettes writhing around the hull, their scales reflecting distorted lights, an orchestra of monsters closing in on them. The crew exchanged terrified glances as the noise crescendoed. Chris felt a heaviness descend. If a connection existed, he knew it was only a moment away. "I'll distract them," he finally decided, heart racing at the thought. "If I can lure their attention, maybe you all can send a signal. A way to reach out, to show we're not a threat." The officer shook her head. "That's suicide, no." Chris interjected, his voice thick with urgency. "It's our only option. Right now, it's either face whatever they are or sit here and wait for our end." A heartbeat of silence followed, thick enough to drown them all. Then the officer nodded slowly, resolve hardening within her spirit. "Okay, Chris, we'll back you up. Just be careful out there." With that, Chris steeled himself. He took a slow, deep breath, feeling the weight of desperation on his shoulders. A sudden crash resonated against the hull, rattling the submarine like a waking nightmare. Chris flinched, his instincts screaming at him to turn back. But in that moment, he knew there was no turning back. They had entered this abyss, and now it was a race against time to uncover what ancient secrets called from the depths. He geared up for the confrontation. The whispers began to swell again, this time louder, more insistent. "Why do you run?" The sound washed over him like a cold wave, sending icy fingers down his spine. Would his gamble pay off? Would they find a way to communicate, or would it only provoke the darkness lurking just beyond the veil? With a final glance back at his crew, Chris braced himself for what lay ahead. The creatures waited, and he was about to take the plunge. Whatever awaited them might be salvation or their ultimate doom, or perhaps something far worse. The darkness crowded closer, and as he edged toward the hatch, one question lingered in Chris's mind. What if the truth was something they weren't prepared to face? The hatch swung open with a creak that echoed through the submarine, a sound that hung in the air like a warning bell. Chris peered into the inky blackness, dread coiling in his gut. He stepped through, heart racing as the frigid water enveloped him, sending a chill up his spine. His eyes adjusted slowly, the darkness swallowing the dim light from behind. Each nerve was alive, burning with the fear of what lurked in the depths around him. He felt the frigid fingers of panic gripping him, urging him to retreat. But there was no turning back now. He had made his choice. Survival depended on a leap into the unknown. Casting a glance back, he could still see the flickering lights of the sub. The faint outline of his crew stood vigil, their faces pale and etched with anxiety. "Stay safe," Carter called out, though the sound was quickly swallowed by the dark water. Then he was alone. As he waded deeper, an unsettling stillness closed around him, broken only by the rhythm of his own breathing, tinged with the metallic taste of fear. Each stroke felt heavy, weighted down by uncertainty. He was a lone swimmer adrift in an ocean of shadow, the unseen eyes of the monsters fixated on him. From somewhere below, the growls began again, a sinister chorus that vibrated through the water. Chris's heart raced. "Okay, think," he murmured to himself, forcing a level-headedness he didn't feel. "Lure them in, show no fear." He moved cautiously, creating splashes that rippled outward, a beckoning gesture to the lurking horrors. Just as he hoped, the growls intensified, an eager intermingling of anticipation and hunger. The murky water shifted, and he sensed movements tracing his every gesture. The display back in the sub haunted him. Those eyes, those gleaming, cold stars, they weren't just watching, they were waiting. He began to shout, his voice an echoing sound. "We're not here to fight. We mean no harm." His words cut through the water, defiant yet tremulous. The growling fell silent. A pregnant pause hung in the water. Chris's pulse roared in his ears as he clawed desperately for consistence. "Please, we seek understanding. What do you want?" He called again, his voice wavering. But the silence continued as he flailed against the gnawing anxiety creeping back in. Suddenly, something shifted in the depths. A form broke the surface, the undulating shape sending shivers of terror coursing through him. It was massive, a swirling form with scales that shimmered like midnight. Eyes, dozens of them, blinked open, glowing ominously. Then came the whispers again, louder now, enveloping him like a shroud. "Why do you come?" The voice crawled under his skin, a chilling embrace that made him shudder. "Why do you disturb the deep?" Chris swallowed hard, panic bubbling up. "We didn't know? We found something on the surface." "We didn't mean to intrude." A low rumble came in response, vibrations shaking the water around him. The creature shifted closer, its many eyes surveying him with a chilling, otherworldly curiosity. "What you found is not yours." A rush of dread flooded Chris. The reality struck him like a fist. They had unearthed more than just relics of the past. Whatever they had uncovered had awakened something ancient, something protective of its territory. "Please, just tell us how to undo this," he pleaded. "We didn't mean to disturb you." There was a moment of silence, and then the unexpected happened. The creature lunged forward, the water swirling violently as it closed the distance. Chris's breath hitched. This was it. Destruction or revelation waited mere seconds away, and in snap decision, Chris reached out instinctively as the darkness surged around him. The creature paused, caught between aggression and curiosity, considering the trembling form that dared touch the abyss. But just then, an explosive echo reverberated through the water, a familiar sound of metal grinding, more noises than he had heard before. What now? What was coming? It wasn't just the creatures lurking in the depths that haunted him anymore. The whole submarine threatened to collapse, and whatever truths he sought might crush him before he could uncover them. As the water churned, and the shadows loomed larger, one thought consumed him. Would he unlock a connection with the terrifying abyss, or would this search for answers drown him in nightmares? The dark expanse of the ocean twisted around Chris as he floated there, heart hammering wildly. The cold water seeped through his suit, but the temperature couldn't compete with the chill of realization slithering up his spine. He wasn't just facing a creature of nightmares. He had trespassed into realms best left undisturbed. "Why do you come?" The voice wafted through the water, a haunting echo that reverberated inside his mind. The myriad eyes blinked around him, watching, weighing, waiting. "What have you awakened?" Chris clenched his jaw, drawing courage from the depths of fear. He had to be the voice of reason. "We were curious." We discovered something on the surface, a relic. It shouldn't have reached you. The creature's many eyes pulsed, glowing as if absorbing his desperation. It is not just a relic. It is a part of us, a key better left untouched. The world swirled around Chris. He felt as if he were standing on the brink of the ultimate truth, a knowledge that could either save them all or plunge them into oblivion. Please, if you want it back, let us return it. We never meant for this to happen. Silence fell heavily, pressing down hard until Chris's lungs felt like they might burst. Then, an explosion broke through the water, metal grinding and shrieking echoed from the submarine above. He looked back. Dark silhouettes circled, the shadows of both monstrous realities on a collision course. What is happening? Chris shouted, panic rising. Is that your doing? A flicker of understanding, perhaps even sympathy, glimmered in the creature's multitude of eyes. They are afraid and fear breeds chaos, it replied, the voice woven with ancient wisdom. Return what you've disturbed, and achieve understanding or be consumed by your folly. The threat hung in the water, sharp and crystalline. The creature glided closer, its form now a hulking mass, powerful and primordial. You must choose, act now or allow destruction to consume you all, it boomed, the voice rippling through waves and shadows. Against the backdrop of confusion, Chris felt a glimmer of hope ignite within him. It was an invitation to uncover the real threat. The true monsters were not just lurking out there, but were nestled in the hearts and minds of his crew aboard the submarine. Show us the way to return it, he implored, heart racing with urgency. Almost immediately, the creature responded, shifting and revealing a path, its scaled body gliding gracefully around Chris, guiding him back toward the ancient key buried down below. Follow. You must cast aside your fears and look deeper. With resolve hardening in his chest, Chris propelled himself forward, trusting the creature to lead him into deeper, more tangled waters. The others in the submarine had been prompted to respond to the chaos, but there was a lesson hidden in the turmoil. He realized their deepest fears might just be illusions. As he raced through the dark depths, he thought of his crew, feeling a swirling blend of panic and solidarity. They were potentially seconds away from a cataclysm, and yet, it was a treacherous beauty woven within uncertainty. Imagining Carter and the officer in the control room, he could only hope they were managing the growing panic. Then, just as the moment reached a boiling point, something snapped in the water above, metal crunched, and the submarine rocked. Panic surged like a tsunami through his veins. We need to get out of here, he called through the depths. No, yelled a voice from above, piercing through the waves. It was the officer, clear and urgent. We need to strengthen the hull, it's their instinct to destroy. They're scared, Chris realized aloud, remembering the creature's words. But we can't fight fear with fear. It was a choice the crew had to make at that moment, a monumental test of unity and resolve. Relinquish the relic. Let us send it back. His voice surged with determination. No, you can't, Carter shouted. You're risking it all. Chris shot back. No, it's about understanding. Only through peace can we hope to survive. Outside, the shadows shifted, the creatures strained against the hull. It was chaos, their world and his intersecting as he hovered at the precipice of possibility. He raised his voice, every ounce of conviction behind him. We will not back down. We accept what we disturbed. Let us return it. A rumble echoed through the water, the creature symbiotic with the pulse of the ocean. You have courage. Show it. And just like that, inspiration burst within Chris. Reinforce the hatch with everything you've got, he shouted back to the control room. Prepare to open it. We're going to return the relic to the depths. He surged forward, fear crushed beneath the weight of a mission. They would give forth their findings, return it, no matter the cost. The abyss wrapped tight around them, but within that dim reality shone a sliver of hope. Now, together, they would face the darkness not as prey, but as guardians who would dare to extend hands of understanding. They would either vanquish the monsters of both the ocean and their own hearts, or be swallowed whole, stories merging into legend. As Chris stormed forth, he pushed through despair, embracing the radical shift awaiting them all. Let us do this, he yelled as he rocked the hatch wide open. A surge of rush struck as the vessel shuddered, like the ocean itself awakening. It was not just their fight, but one that called for bravery. Face the truth, echoed through the water, the voices of the deep rallying with understanding. Chris dove into the abyss, feeling the worlds align and shift, a new dawn awakening amidst chaos. He knew they had made their choice. Together, they would change the fate of the ocean or become trails of what was once. The darkness beckoned, but it was no longer a harbinger of doom. It was a place of potential waiting to unfurl. "The truth will be our guide," Chris whispered, and with that, they surrendered to the depths and the unfolding mystery that awaited them. As the hatch swung open, pulling reality forward into the unknown, he held tight to his voice, ready to communicate a new tale woven from darkest dreams. Don't leave this moment behind. You need to subscribe now to catch our next thrilling adventure. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and keep our stories alive. Flood the comments with your reactions and theories about this wild ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how it all unfolds. Let us grow this community together.